Well, good afternoon. We're going to get this town hall kicked off. But let me pray for us as we talk about the church's business. So, Lord, we just come and we say thank you for this afternoon. Thank you for a day where we can come and worship you, Lord, and we can come and be about your business. Help us to be a church that reaches out to not only this community, but around the world. That is to be salt and light wherever we go, whatever we do. And now as we commit this hour to you, be present here in our discussions. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Well, first off, we're going to have Jan Sassaman, the chair of our finance committee, tell you about the church's books.
Good afternoon. Okay, what I would like to talk about is a little bit about the closeout of the 2018 budget, a little bit about the 2019 bridge budget, a little bit about stewardship, and a little bit about what we need to do to go forward with the 2019-2020 full year budget. So for the 2018 budget that I'm going to show you, it's important to note that the data do not show restricted funds and transfers from things like endowments. So if you or someone writes a check or gives money for the Appalachian Service Project, for UMCOR, for alternate giving, that would be in the restricted funds, and I've not included those in this analysis. Transfers from endowment are also not included because I want to compare apples to apples and not apples to grapefruit. In 2018, these are our revenues. We had $1.255 million in pledges. We had a total revenues of $1.471 million. Try to remember that 4.71, okay? Expenses. Program, 62,000, outreach, 6,000, conference appropriation, 239,000, 46,000 of capital contributions, 184,000 for general maintenance. This is a big old building. Takes a lot of money to maintain it. 43,600 for admin expenses, 880, actually 881 to round it off for payroll. Other personnel costs 122. 1.584. A little bit bigger number. The difference is $112,000. We think that there's another $26,000 coming in for 2018 from payback on taxes and some other transfers. So we're looking at 86,000 deficit for last year. Okay, that's 2018. This is just a graphic breakdown of how these expenses were broken out. As you can see, the big player is payroll. Now, don't be fooled by outreach being so small, because outreach, there's a lot of outreach money that comes from transfers and primarily restricted funds. Again, people make a contribution for a specific purpose. That's restricted, that flows through. It's not included in this analysis. All right, we are now in a 6-month bridge period. I think most of you are aware of the fact that we went from a calendar year budgeting protocol to a July through June fiscal year. And that left us with either trying to come up with an 18-month budget or a 12-month and a 6-month budget. The Finance Committee decided to go with a 6-month budget, and that's from January through June of this year. The 6-month budget was approved by the Church Council, and again, the numbers that I'm going to show you are less restricted and transfers. We just can't predict those ahead of time, so we're not trying to. Okay. We're looking at current pledges of 660,000. Now, I'm going to give you some caveats about these numbers in just a second. We're looking at revenues of 766, actually 767,000. And go ahead and let's have the next one. We struggled with how to come up with these numbers, and with Mike's assistance, we looked at historical giving data for the past 5 years, and we looked at the first 6-month giving pattern of each of those 5 years to come up with our pledge number. The numbers that we have in our budget includes as income. Go back to the, let's see, other income. This other income figure here of 24,000 plus also includes the conference contribution to the church planning effort that you'll be hearing about in a few minutes. Okay, back. Now, I'll show you the actual pledge figures in just a moment. They differ from the 660,000 that we predicted. We assume that regular pledge givers will continue the current rate of giving. Okay? Let's see the next slide. Expenses. Go ahead. We can do this quickly. We've got our program expenses. Of course, these are ahead of, these are projected. These are what we think things will be. And this represents a balanced budget. Let's go ahead and see the next slide. A similar breakdown from the 2018. Of course, it's based on historical patterns, so it's going to be pretty much the same. Let's go to the next one. What I want to talk about are pledges. Pledges. We estimated that we'll have 660,000, but what we have received in pledges, 374,000. Those are the pledge numbers that we had, because only 170 people, families, pledging units have pledged. In 2018, 336. We're down 166 pledging units. We're assuming that people who pledged here, didn't pledge here, are continuing to give. Next slide. This is far less than we anticipated in pledges, But as I said, it assumes that givers will continue to do so at the same periodic rate. But I asked myself several questions. Are the historically higher givers those that traditionally understand the pledge process and made a bridge pledge? We asked people to make an estimate of giving rather than a pledge, and has that been a source of confusion? I don't know. I mean, y'all have to ask yourself if that's a source of confusion. And of course, we have another issue. Those of you that have served on finance or have looked at, served on similar committees, know that December is when a lot of people make up their pledge. You know, people wait till 15th of December and say, oh gosh, I've got to write these checks. And we get a big glob of contributions in December. Now, right now, for our bridge period, from January to June, we don't have a December in there, so we're not sure how that's going to affect giving. Bottom line, revenue, not expenses, is the issue. We have tried real hard to hold down expenses in the church, but we can't control revenue. This is too small to see, but it's an analysis of revenues and expenses from 2010 to 2018. And I'm going to show you a graph that'll show you some of this. The green line are the total expenses. The blue line are the contributions. The red line is inflation. Our contributions pretty well hold with inflation. Expenses hold with inflation, but contributions are taking a dip. The brown is the total payroll. If you give me the next slide. Actually, that's not on the slide, so let me go back. Yeah. The biggest overall increase has been in health insurance. In 2002, clergy health insurance was $6,182 annually per clergy person. In 2018, it was $14,151, more than double. For all other employees, it has gone from $6,182 to $11,340 annually per person. Inflation, purchasing power of $100 in 2003 is equal to 136. 100 to 136. This line here is actually $1 million in 2010, inflated to 2018. All right, next slide. Last but not least, the budgeting process for the new fiscal year. Let me go ahead and the clergy, the staff, and the committees hopefully will submit budget requests to Mike Saunders by the 6th of May. Stewardship and finance will be looking at those numbers and prepare a proposed budget, and that will be dealt with by the Finance Committee on the 16th of May. We hope to get it on the 16th. We have a scheduled meeting on May 20th and hope to approve it then. That then goes to Church Council on the 6th of June for approval at their meeting on June 10th. And I think that's it.
I'm the color commentary guy for all this. So there's just a couple things to highlight. One, for the pledges for this bridge period. So part of the challenge here, I think, is that, so we sent a letter out, and this was really a very soft pledge campaign. So we sent one communication out, said, please give an estimate of giving for this bridge period, and that's it. So it didn't look like any of our consistent messaging, and so we received what we received, and we didn't remind anybody of anything else for that. And we intentionally chose to do that. Why? Because we were going to have a more traditional pledge campaign for the new fiscal year budget in the spring. And we thought 2 intense times of giving, requesting giving, might not be very well received. Well, hindsight 2020. You know, I might have just suggested that we do 2 intense times for that. I also think that we as a church have to do a better job at saying this is exactly what we need from the congregation. And to be a little bit more straightforward about it than we typically are. Our typical belief is that we've got folks who love and care about the church. They're going to give as much as they can, and we don't need to, beat them up over the head saying, we need this, we need this, we need this. And I just think I don't think we need to do that, but I do think we need to be very clear, very straightforward about what we need, and then what level of gift actually helps to sustain us. Because what do we know about healthcare? My assumption is, and I would say this when I was in Nashville at the publishing house and was responsible for our church's health plan, our company's health plan, that every year we expect an increase. So every year I'd say to the employees, you're going to pay more, and you're going to pay more. You're going to pay more as part of the cost sharing between the employee and the overall institution. It's just what you could expect, and it's what we're going to see for a while. It doesn't look like it's going to change, and so there are things that, as Jan said very well, there are things that are changing that relate to those kinds of numbers that we can't control. We're going to control costs in other ways as best we can. And we'll see over this next year, this 6 months and this bridge period, if through more clear communication, our church will rise to the level of giving that will sustain the current level of operation. And if with that clarity and that effort, that answer proves to be no, and then we'll have to make some changes, and we will. We don't want to have to, because those changes are generally only made in one area, the area of personnel. So we're going to see how we do here with a period of clarity, and again, that's all the commentary I have on that. We'll just see where we get, right? Right. All right. I think next up are the Cokers, or the Coker. I don't know if it's plural or singular here.
Okay. Maybe we'll stand over here. Great. We'll see when they pick up.
So Sally and I lead the senior adult team, but Creighton had the foresight to put this up, which shows where the senior adult team fits. So hopefully all of you have seen this before. 4 commissions, This is the Discipleship and Nurture Commission, a lot of very wonderful teams that are part of the Disciple and Nurture Commission, and we're one of them. Senior Adult Team, right here, Senior Adults Team. Sally and I have led what used to be called the Senior Adult Council for since 2009, we really didn't exactly know what we were supposed to be doing, but we were doing joy, and joy was giving us a lot of joy, and the people who participated in joy a lot of joy. And we had a we met every few months to plan joy activities and talk about other things we might be doing. And Manuel Bortman was a member of that team, and is a member of that team. And over the last 3 or 4 years, he's been saying, older adults are not dead yet. They want to be doing more things. Now, there are a lot of things going on in his church, and we'll mention them, but he was especially a person prodding us to try to find places that things could need to be done that weren't being done, and the Senior Adult Council. And so we've been working on this for a while before we went to this new terminology of commissions and teams and the Senior Adult Team. And about the time this happened last summer, we had some more things we wanted to do, and you'll see what they are. Now, again, we're going to say, before we quit talking, just mention some of the many, many other activities and ministries and missions of the church that senior adults are involved in. This is not it, but this is what the Senior Adult Team is now doing. These 6 bubbles around it, the Joy Group, which we've been doing for all these years, this new Helping Hands ministry with the Health Ministries team, which was announced this morning. I know some of you, many of you may have already filled in a questionnaire, survey, a new intergenerational initiative we're thinking of, a caring and visitation. This is non-clergy, but kind of pastoral care by non-clergy, mini memoirs, newsletters, and so forth. So Sally and I will just very briefly mention these. Go for it. Oh, maybe I should, do you have the bullets that you can toggle back and forth? Yeah, so we had a couple of bullets. So here, the mission of the Senior Adults Team is to provide opportunities for senior adults for fellowship, learning, and service. So now if you can go back to the, you want to talk about that? You want to talk into this? You need to talk into this. Yeah.
That's why he went first, because his voice carries better than mine. But in any case, with Joy itself, it was basically food, fellowship, maybe I reverse it, fellowship, still can't hear? Fellowship, food, and fun. So fellowship, food, and fun were all captured in Joy itself. And basically, those are monthly events. We plan them out several months in advance, et cetera, et cetera. And so many of you actually have participated in those. But as we brought out, Jim, as he suggested, we've come up with all of these subgroups within what was once just what we were doing with Joy. So go ahead with Helping Hands.
So we're just going to toggle back and forth here. So Helping Hands, it was announced this morning. We're working with the Health Ministries team on that. It's an effort to have people in our congregation in an organized way to help meet needs of people in our congregation who have needs that are unmet. We're not trying to do something that circles are already doing or other groups, but to try to find, and as one step in that, we have this questionnaire, a survey that's available. We hope, if you haven't filled it out, you will. You can do it online. There are copies, hard copies. Can you hold that for me? Like this. It's just one sheet of paper, your name and other information on one side and the other side, a list of things that we're thinking about trying to make available, tasks that we can do as individuals, as volunteers, to meet needs of others in our church family. So if you haven't filled it out, please do. There are hard copies scattered around on the little table out here and the way to the office, and you can go online for that. And as a kind of a complement to this, so this is, again, something that's kind of bubbled up within the Senior Adults Team, one we're calling Caring and Visitation. So we hear such good things about clergy visits. Manuel is a minister of visitation, and all of the other clergy do a lot of visits from people that I've heard from over the last several months, people in the hospital, somebody visits them every day, a lot of home visits and so forth. Still, there are a lot of people that could be visited that perhaps aren't being visited, can't be visited by clergy and staff. We have over 500 in our congregation aged 65 and above. A lot of us don't need visiting, but some do. And so we've established a caring and visitation team. It's led by 3 fantastic people, Jane Campbell, Cynthia Foskey, and Arnold Pender. And we're going to try in an organized way to kind of have a list of people to visit or make phone calls to or send cards to, just keep in touch with us to kind of further support what clergy are doing. And we're going to be asking others who have a heart for this kind of thing to be part of that ministry. So this is just getting underway, but those people, Cynthia, Jane, and Arnold, are leading this for us, and we hope many of you will be part of this caring and visitation ministry.
Many of you are participating already in different ways in intergenerational, but that is one area where, as a larger church, we would like to see more intergenerational happening. I'm one of those that grew up in a little tiny church. Everything we did was intergenerational. But as our congregations grow, that we lose some of those relationships. So a couple of things just recently. The whole Nurturing and Discipleship Commission meets about once every 4 months or so, the leadership of that, and we share ideas, et cetera, and get a sense of what other people are doing. And it bubbled up that at the Valentine's dance, those parents might prefer spending their time with their children instead of decorating or taking down. And so that's a place where seniors helped. We helped with both parts, the getting ready during the day and also taking it down. So those opportunities bubble up, and we learn some of that through when the whole commission gets together itself. We've also got Adopt a Wesley student. We've got, we were asked recently when the confirmands came that as a congregation, we could be actually mentoring and praying for the confirmands, which is another way that very quietly we as a full congregation can support other demographics within the congregation. So we're trying to tap into that. And if you have any ideas, see us.
We have 2 bubbles left. I think we've covered, yes, Joy Group, Helping Hands, Intergenerational Caring Visitation. We have these 2, newsletter and mini memoirs. So again, over the last few years or more recent past, a kind of sense that we don't have a communication outlet. Communication is just for older adults. Now, this whole thing about senior adults to older adults, these terms are fraught. But generally, so there are a lot of people in their 70s that don't feel like I'm a senior adult. Sally and I have been doing Joy. I'm 75 in 2 weeks. We've been doing Joy for 10 years now, but there are a lot of people think, I'm not even 70 yet. I'm too young for this senior adult stuff. We're trying not to deal with all that stuff. We know that demographic is there. And even if you're only in your 60s now, it won't be long. And it goes faster and faster till you will be in your 70s and beyond. So we have introduced, as of last December, a quarterly newsletter just for senior adults. And for now, it's called the Senior Adult Newsletter. And thanks to the New Realm software, it's just so easy to send this to everybody 65 and above. And so you don't have to even open that email, let alone read the 4-page newsletter. But we're going to do this as a quarterly, about midway between Chimes. So we're working on the next one now. Chimes came out earlier this month. So in March, we'll come out with another one. This is intended to be for and by senior adults. Not all of you in this room are senior adults, but some of you are, and you should have received the first one. You'll receive the second one in a month or so. We'd love to have your feedback. And as a separate but kind of a related thing, mini memoirs. Again, this is kind of a special project of mine. Those of us, especially Sally and me now, we have so many friends in this church who are in their 80s and 90s. We're going to a lot more funerals than we might have otherwise. And oftentimes, I was at Bill Olson's funeral now, going on 2 years ago. I've known Bill, we knew Bill for well over 30 years. There were things there, important things in his life I didn't know about. And so this idea of a mini memoir is let's have a way to tell our stories and share our stories. Not in 100-page memoirs, but in 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 pages. So I've been promoting this and encouraging people, write up a little memoir, not necessarily about your whole life. I got the first one yesterday. And sometime down the road in a few months, it's a wonderful story by Alan Berman about when he was 20 years old and an incredible adventure he had. It's a little memoir. So this is another project that we have, and we can link this then into, as we receive these, into the newsletters. So if you're not interested or you don't know this person, there'll be a little paragraph in there, and if you say, well, maybe I'd like to read that, click here. It'll give you access to the PDF, and you can read a mini memoir about Jan, for example, or Anne, or anyone sitting in this room. So anyway, that's another new project that we're just rolling out in the months ahead.
In any case, the senior adults are participating in many of the UUMC activities right now, and ministries. And as I'm looking out, I'm seeing Habitat just sitting right there. And a lot, again, that can be a more intergenerational kind of experience for all of us. But many of the senior adults participate in many of the ministries and activities, and some examples are
Sunday school teachers and members,
the Methodist Women,
Methodist men,
Stephen Ministries,
Bible study,
the Adult Choir,
quiet care,
Centering Prayer,
widows groups,
Grief Care,
activities of the higher education team,
and office volunteers.
and members of many other church teams and groups and committees.
There you have it. Thank you, Manuel. We give Manuel all the credit for pushing us out of the Joy group into a larger vision.
Thank you, too. I feel like I needed to gotta amp myself up for my presentation now after that. That was energetic and just wonderful ministry that's going on and that is coming up. So thank you for sharing. What I'd like to do now is take just a few minutes to share a little bit more about what I shared in the services this morning related to the General Conference, the special session of the General Conference that's coming up next weekend in St. Louis. And then I would like to take just a moment to answer any questions we have. So just as a recap, this conference is a called session of the General Conference. General Conference usually meets every 4 years, and so our normal General Conference will be in 2020. This session was one that was requested by the previous General Conference session in 2016 to help us find a way forward as we consider matters of human sexuality in the life of the church. And so a special commission was gathered, the Commission on the Way Forward, representative of people, lay people and clergy from across the connection. And they were to submit plans that the church might consider at this special session. They came up with 3. The traditionalist plan, as it's called, this plan maintains our current restrictions around human sexuality in the life of the church, and so it maintains the disciplinary language that the practice of homosexuality is inconsistent with the practice of Christian teaching. It maintains the restriction around clergy performing marriages in our churches, remains constrictions around practicing LGBTQ clergy persons being ordained, and what it does is it heightens disciplinary actions, makes more easy disciplinary actions for any clergy who might perform a wedding or something like that. So that's one plan. I call the traditionalist plan. The one church plan, which is, just so you know, a plan that I've been advocating for. I'm speaking at a couple forums while at St. Louis around this theme. The one church plan is not a perfect plan. It doesn't represent for my LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters who are going to be there, my siblings who are going to be there. It doesn't represent all of the forms of justice for LGBTQ plus persons, but it does allow at a congregational level for us to express what we choose to do. Will we choose, so it removes the restrictive language, so that language that says the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, it removes that language and says basically that a local church can determine, clergy there will determine if they will celebrate weddings or not. The local church will determine if it will receive LGBTQ plus clergy persons as part of its pastoral staff. At the annual conference level, an annual conference will determine, and the annual conference's boards of ordained ministry will determine if they will ordain LGBTQ plus persons. And so it just means to take it from that general church level more to an annual conference in a local church level as an increment forward in this conversation. There's another plan called the Connectional Plan that basically created 3 jurisdictions across the Methodist body. One was a more progressive, one was a more traditionalist, and one band was a what they called a uniting, so people kind of in the middle. And so that was also a plan. The difficulties of pulling that plan off, as you think about our current discipline in the United Methodist Constitution, it was a plan that people honestly just couldn't wrap their minds around how it would practically work. Potentially could even cause certain kinds of inequity across those systems as you think about appointments, as you think about the sharing of funds and resources, things like that. So the 2 plans that are really on the table are the traditionalist plan and the one church plan. So here are a couple things that could happen. What could happen is we could vote on one of those plans and then say, like every general conference, that at the annual conference following it must then approve whatever the general conference says. So you need 75% of those annual conferences to approve whatever a general conference says for it to actually become what we do as United Methodists. So that is a thing that could happen, either the traditionalist plan or the one church plan. A new plan could bubble up in session. Not likely, but it's technically possible that something else could come from this that we haven't yet anticipated. If the history of general conferences, and certainly the recent history of general conferences teach us anything, is that it's most likely that nothing will happen. Because, seriously, the discipline is meant to steady the church from change more so than change anything. And so through parliamentary procedure, you can just blow the whole thing up and nothing actually could happen. It's also the case that we could vote on something and they say it needs to be perfected for the 2020 General Conference. And then we have to wait and see if that General Conference upholds it or does away with it and creates something else. That could also happen. What could also happen is we reach some kind of stalemate here over this coming weekend and then say, we will create a new commission that will that we want to bring a report to the 2020 General Conference about how the church could split amicably. That could also be something that is recommended. So there are multiple ways this thing could go. If the traditionalist plan passes, there'll be churches on the left and on the left of center who would likely say, well, we're going to split away because we can't do this anymore. We can't maintain this restrictive language. It's a potential that could happen. If the one church plan passes, that local option plan, there'll be people on the religious right in the denomination who will say, we can't do that. We are going to split away. It could actually be folks on the further left who say the plan is still not enough, who could still split away. If nothing happens, same thing. Same thing. There will be people on the right and on the left, the religious right and religious left will say, we can't do this anymore. And likely there will be some kind of splintering. So I'm not saying splitting necessarily, but splintering is a possibility in most of the scenarios, I'm afraid. I'm really sad to say that, but given our social, political context and what you see politically happening around the rest of the country and these echo chambers that we live in in them in the life of the church as well, and we wrestle with one another politically in these ways as well as people truly believe. I believe that everyone who's coming to the General Conference believes they're doing the right thing for Christ and Christ's church. Some part in their lives, and they might be doing it for various reasons, and we can critique it, and but the people that I encounter and talk to believe that they're doing the right thing for Christ and Christ's church. We might have disagreements around the room with one another, but folks believe it, which makes it all very hard. That's what I think is going to happen. Again, I'm going to keep folks updated via email, but certainly on Facebook Live. Really encourage y'all who are on Facebook to follow, and you should get a notification or at least see archived videos that I do there. I'm hopeful that the church will hold together in some way. I'm always going to hold that hope. I'm also kind of a practical realist, having been to the last couple general conferences where we've been on the brink of this, at least a couple times here, and certainly at the last general conference. And so something will happen to the people currently called United Methodist. And depending on where our church fits along that spectrum, we may fall into the group of people that just feel that it's doing what we already believe we want to do, or we might actually have to make a choice and say, as a congregation, will we move toward folks who are on the, I guess it should move y'all's direction, religious right, or more towards folks who are on a religious left, or is there a middle that seems malleable enough for us to fit in that space? We may be called upon to make that decision in 2019 or in 2020. I'm not sure. We'll just have to see how it turns out. So, a couple questions here, and then I'll turn it over to Pastor Daniel. Yes? All right, so Toby, you remember all the delegates from our conference?
So our conference, you can go to nccumc.org/GC, and you can see all of our conference delegates from the North Carolina Annual Conference and any information that the bishop has put up about that.
nccumc.org. So part of what you know, so I'm a member of two conferences, so still a member of both the Texas and the North Carolina Annual Conference. I was on the Texas Conference delegation, so I'm technically sitting among the Texans for that for the purposes of this conference. Yes.
If the conference should go for the more inclusiveness option,
Mm-hmm.
and a church chooses to accept gay people as ministers,
Mm-hmm.
what does the annual conference do? Do we have to be in compliance with the annual conference?
All right, so if we go with this one church plan, and say if the conference chooses the more open posture as a conference level, we're going to ordain LGBTQ plus persons, or we're going to celebrate with any church that conducts weddings for them. Then, so this is where the details of the one church plan still have to get worked out, which is why I say that this could be kicked into 2020. So, so what we believe will happen is that at a local church level, we would still choose for weddings. But what could happen is that at the annual conference level, they could say, we're creating restrictions around clergy persons, and in all likelihood, there will over time be migration of clergy persons who say, we want to be practicing LGBTQ plus persons. I mean, over time, that could likely happen. And this is, and so what I think you see is, or the other way around. I'm trying to forget the scenario I'm giving you. So we could see on the annual conference level, perhaps more conservative clergy moving towards annual conferences that feel that way. This is what I think happens over time with the One Church plan. The annual conferences at a conference level say, we're going to be more open, or we're going to be open, and then other annual conferences say we're going to be more restrictive. And over time, it will create a sorting hat kind of a thing, and you'll have clergy that move towards annual conferences that best suit them. I think that's actually what you have happening across a period of years. And so we, again, local churches, we believe, would still be able to make their decisions as far as weddings at a local church level. But I do think that the annual conference level will affect the culture of the conference slowly and surely over time. I think that's what ends up happening. My guess, again, I don't know for sure, Manuel, but I think that will likely happen.
So, follow on from Dan's question. If you live in one church, if on an annual conference that will not remain, if this church takes a more liberal stance, could then this church say we will accept a gay minister, or is that?
So the way I think the legislation will end up happening is that we would have more trouble doing that at a local church level for clergy. I think that is what will end up happening. See, so when I say that some of my LGBTQ plus siblings feel like this plan is still fraught with challenge, is these very issues. Because based on what you think your annual conference will do, you feel better. I think that the North Carolina annual conference has a history of a little bit more balance. I mean, I think about the Episcopal candidates that have emerged from our annual conference have been more inclusive as of late. And so the hope then is that this conference would be one of those conferences that says, look, we're going to let folks choose. We still are in the most, the southeast jurisdiction and the south central jurisdiction do arm wrestling matches for who's the most conservative jurisdiction. So we still are in one of the two most conservative jurisdictions in United Methodism. And that also has an effect. In the U.S., there are certainly certain annual conferences, at least outside of the U.S., that hold a more uniform line than we think we do. Yes.
Just lead to the next question. Earlier this week, you told me that you were optimistic about the passage
Of the One Church plan, yeah.
of the One Church plan, but I'm sort of looking at numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers roughly are like,
Yeah.
7.5 million American United Methodists, 5 million from the central conferences, mostly Africa, who are willing to vote conservatively, and that coalition of conservatives and Africans and Asians has always prevailed on the church's
All right. Yes. So here, I'm going to answer this question, then I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Daniel, because you get me going on here, I will not stop. This will become a Methodist camp meeting of some sort. Okay, so here's the thing. The different straw polls that I hear from more left-leaning folks and more right-leaning folks. I mean, the Texas Conference is a very conservative annual conference, and so anybody who is centrist to left is considered far out. So, like, whatever you consider me to be, I'm like far out for those folks. But I hear these straw polls that go back and forth. There are some who feel that the traditionalist plan, though it's consistent with their beliefs, feels a little bit too draconian in the punishment for people who choose differently. And so you do have a certain amount of folks on the religious right who will say, I just can't vote for that plan, as one person said, because it feels mean to me. There are African delegates who feel that they've been put upon too much by conservatives stateside. So you want my vote, but do I actually get a better share in your system? I mean, there's a question. And so the One Church plan, what it does is it says that the central conference, so the conferences outside the United States, can maintain the current discipline. So they don't actually have to do anything differently. And it's probably one of the smartest things that the One Church plan did. So I am guardedly optimistic today. I might be in sackcloth and ashes tomorrow. I'm very emotional yo-yo on this, but I'm guardedly optimistic today that the One Church plan will pass because of this, because the traditionalist plan doesn't quite feel resonant with certain folks on the religious right. It is also a plan that is going to be amended likely on the floor of this conference. So it could be amended to be more palatable to some folks. And so that could shift the dynamic. But today, I'm guardedly optimistic that if any plan passes, it's going to be the One Church plan. All right, I just got to stop. We got to stop. So, but you email me on this, give a call. I'm happy to talk about this over the course of this week as much as you like to, because I have Methodist friends from every other part of the world. This is all they want to text me and email me and talk to me about as we move towards the general conference session. So, but do please be in prayer for us as we enter into these days in St. Louis. All right, Pastor Daniel.
Thank you. All right, changing the subject from denominational church politics, zooming back in here to where we were at. And I want to share with you about church planting. I think I've met all of you. I was looking around the room, but if I haven't, my name's Daniel Childs. I'm the pastor of church planting here. And I'm hopeful that this is not the first you're hearing about church planting, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, real fast review. You may remember that last spring, the conference approached our church with this opportunity to do a multi-site church plant. What in the world is a multi-site church plant? Well, that's where we at University would start a new church community in a new location to reach new demographics, but this new community would remain part of our church. It would be part of the University UMC family. So that's what a multi-site church plant is. Why would we be interested in doing that? Well, besides our call as Christians to reach out into the world and try to engage more people, this is a way that we could do that and particularly target some demographics that we'd like to do better at reaching. So I'm thinking of young adults, young professionals, young families, trying to work towards more diversity. I'm thinking racial, ethnic diversity, socioeconomic diversity, and in particular, folks out in the community who, for whatever reason, have an aversion to more traditional forms of church. Those people need church just as much as any of us, and so this is a way that we can reach out and create a new space to engage those folks. And as you may know, new church communities in general just tend to be very effective at reaching folks who don't already have a church home. And we've seen a number of churches around our conference and around the country who have done a multi-site church plant like what we're considering, and they've had a lot of success, and it's made a big impact and allowed those churches to multiply their ministry. So those are just some of the reasons that we're considering this. And all this is exciting, but as you can probably tell, this is a big decision. This is a big project. And so when the conference approached our church about this, I wasn't here yet, but my understanding is that we kind of said, we need to think about this, and we need to pray about this. And so we agreed to enter into this discernment period. And that's what we're in right now. I was sent here by our bishop to kind of help facilitate and lead this discernment process that we're going through. Discernment is about prayerfully exploring this opportunity, this possibility, and trying to determine if this is something that God is calling us to do. And on the one hand, if this is something that God is calling us to do, we want to do it, right? And on the other hand, if God's not calling us to do this, it would be good to know that as well, and so that we can focus our resources and energy elsewhere. So that's what discernment is about. And we're nearing the end of our discernment period now, and that's why I wanted to take a few minutes this afternoon to update you on our progress. Now, our discernment process, some people ask me sometimes, so what is it? Do you just sit around and twiddle your thumbs and hope that a lightning bolt strikes you and says, yes, go do church planting, or no, don't do church planting? No. It's an active discernment process. And there's two major initiatives that we've used in our discernment. So the first one is we've formed a discernment team. This is a team of folks from church council, they're leaders from our other ministry commissions, and we've met together regularly throughout the fall and this winter, and we've gone through a program called Mary's Path. And this Mary's Path program is something that was developed at the conference level, that other churches around the conference that are also thinking about multi-site church planting, this is something that they're going through as well. And it's kind of guided us through this prayerful study and prayerful exploration of what all would be involved if we decided to do this multi-site church plant, and kind of to guide our thinking on whether or not this is the right opportunity for us here at University. I'm going to invite one of our discernment team members up in just a second to tell you a little more about what all that team has done and explored together. But ultimately, the discernment team will make a kind of a recommendation to the church council and offer feedback to the church council ahead of the church council's decision ultimately on whether we're going to proceed with this church planting opportunity or if we're going to go in a different direction. So that's one, the discernment team is one of the kind of major discernment initiatives that we've taken. The second one is that we've actually kind of experimented with getting a new community started. We've taken the preliminary steps towards this new community, and the purpose here is simply to kind of test the waters and see, are we getting any traction? Can we pull together a leadership team? Can we get some folks in the community that don't already have a church interested in participating in this new community that we're creating? And of course, the goal with this initiative is to see if there's a response, and if the preliminary steps towards this new community are bearing fruit, well, then that's a sign that the Holy Spirit is with us on this. On the other hand, if we're spinning our wheels and we're not gaining any traction and there's no response in the community and we're getting nowhere, well, then that's also a pretty good indication that maybe this is not the right opportunity for us right now. So those are the two discernment initiatives. That's what I want to spend some time with you this afternoon, sharing and fleshing out a little bit, the discernment team, and then actually taking steps towards getting a new community started. So let's spend a few minutes now hearing about what the discernment team has done together. I'm going to invite Joe Ritter forward to share for just a minute. And some of you know Joe. He was, up until this January, a member of church council and has been active on the discernment team. So take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be up here talking about the planting ministry process. And I have a few slides to help you understand better the process we've been trying to go through. This prayerful process, this methodical process, if you will. And I wanted you to be aware of the members of the team. So let's go to that first slide there that has the members of the team. And then I want to step through the 4 or 5 things that we've done over the period of time since September when we started meeting. I can recite to you who those people are, some of whom are here today: Steve Crouch, Kathleen Harrell, Jennifer McClone, Adam Broom, Eden Justad, Cole Justad, and myself. And of course, Daniel's been kind of our leader. So if you have questions or want to have discussions with somebody, including the lay people I mentioned, please feel free to approach those folks about the planting ministry. But there's been about, about 5 basic things that we've undertaken since September. We've done a book study. We've had theological discussions on approximately a monthly basis. We've engaged in mission field investigations, kind of empirical data, demographics, to see what the potential is for a planting ministry to take hold somewhere in this area. We took a trip over to Edenton Street United Methodist Church in Raleigh and visited their church on Morgan, which is a great example of a planting ministry that's thriving over there. And then we reflected on our church and our church's strengths and weaknesses for undertaking a planting ministry. Here we go. So you see the folks on the screen there. Let's go ahead to the next slide. And those are the things we have undertaken that I just mentioned. And let's go on to the next slide. We're talking about a book study in the form of Paul and Apostle Study by a Duke Divinity professor that I commend to you. It's a very readable book. It's about 200 pages, so it's not a large book, but it's about, as one reviewer said, it's a walk through Paul's life, and part of what he did was planting ministry. So it's a very appropriate book for us to be studying and learning from Paul's process as he started the early church. So what are some of the other things in the book? There's basically 2 parts there, but I don't want to take up a lot of time with this, but I'd like to highlight to you these major takeaways. Talking about one of the churches in particular there, and there was a list of 14 problems that Campbell identified. And this morning, as I sat in the sanctuary and heard Justin preach about some of the need for, how's the word maybe here, kindness. And in that particular church, in the early church, there was a lack of kindness among the congregation members, including the leaders of the church, and having a kind and kind of gentle attitude as the church undertook many issues. In the early church, you had Gentiles, Jews, and individuals that were pagan worshipers, essentially, that had been converted to Christianity. So you can imagine the diversity that existed in the early churches there, and some of that relates to our potential planting ministry here and how Paul dealt with those. In that last highlight, he talks about how Paul allowed for some flexibility in the way that the members of the early church were asked to adhere to the Jewish rules or adhere to their old cultural norms that they experienced, and how do you balance those things out? And that's, I guess, a lot of what our denomination is going through today. But that was the book study we undertook, and we did other things too. We talked about different concepts like church planting and outreach, and how those 2 concepts might overlap. And is there a difference there? Go ahead to the next slide. We talked about many difficult questions there. Are there people in our midst who have not truly heard or are not actively answering God's invitation to pursue the communion we were all created for? Some really difficult questions there. And we had open and frank discussion about those among the members of the committee. We also undertook mission field investigation, so-called. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of, I guess you would call conclusions or projections that grew out of some demographic data that we had at our disposal. And I think it's really interesting when you look in a 15-minute drive from our church or from South Point or from other locations in our region, the potential there for young people to become a part of the church. And those are just two examples of the empirical data that we had. We took a trip over to Edenton Street United Methodist Church, and personally, I probably enjoyed this as much as anything else we did. We did other very enjoyable things, but it was really interesting to go over to Edenton Street. And I just took this off their website and said, for over 2 centuries, Edenton Street has sought to faithfully share Christ from the heart of Raleigh. Well, that kind of resonated. I mean, I'm not sure what the date would be for a university church as opposed to 1811. I'm sure some of you who know the history of our church could associate a date with that. But from the center of Chapel Hill, this church has been about the same thing. And then we went over and enjoyed worship and had some very, I thought, fortunate opportunity to sit down with the leaders of the church on Morgan, which is just a few blocks away from Edenton Church, which I thought was interesting too. And they talked about it's not a bowl of cherries. I mean, you don't just start a new campus and everything's hunky-dory. You have to communicate and you have to learn from your mistakes and whatnot. But it was really uplifting to see the number of people, of course, that were in this renovated automobile garage worshiping, and not only at the 11 o'clock service, but at the earlier service too. So a lot of young people, a lot of families, and just a lot of activities. But also hearing them talk about the challenges of having such a planting ministry. So those are some of the things we did. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. We talked about the strengths and weaknesses for church planting that we have here at, and that probably ought to be planting, I'm not sure, but those were some of the discussion questions that we entertained amongst us and trying to come, I guess, to make a recommendation to the church council in the near future on how we might proceed on this. Daniel's going to cover what's to come.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. I should say, too, if y'all have questions that are arising as we're talking, feel free to jot those down on the note cards. We're going to be collecting those later, and we want to get answers for your questions. So that was, remember I said we had kind of 2 major initiatives to our discernment process, right? One was the discernment team. We just heard about that. Let's switch gears and talk about our efforts to actually begin starting a new community. Back in the fall, we pulled together a leadership team that's been meeting weekly. We've actually been meeting at my house. I live near South Point Mall, just in Durham there. And we spent several months together planning for this potential new community, visioning together. We prayed together. We'd share meals. We always ended each of our meetings by sharing communion together. And by the end of the fall, we discovered that we had kind of gelled as a group, and there was this common vision coming together for a potential new community. And that was a great start, but in order to actually start a new community, you need a lot more than just a team of excited leaders. That's where you start, but that can't be it. We wanted to see if we could multiply and begin to grow this new community. And we began planning a new small group ministry. And we began planning some ongoing mission projects and social events to try to reach out into our surrounding area and start gathering folks, particularly people who don't already have a church home. So as we were making preparations to reach out and grow our new community, we quickly realized that this new thing we were kind of beginning to create was going to need a name. You can't invite people to be part of some new community that doesn't have a name. That's just weird and maybe cultish, right? So we had to call it something. And we talked about a lot of different possibilities, but after a lot of discussion and consultation with Pastor Justin and the church council and the leaders, and the church council gave us its blessing for us to call this new community kindred. And if you've been in worship frequently here at University, this is a word, kindred or kinship, that you've probably heard Pastor Justin use in his sermons. Kindred or kinship refers to, as you know, family relationships of deep love and connection that we believe as Christians ultimately goes back to the deep love and connection within the triune God, right? And we want to share that and embody that both here from within this community at University, but we also, with our new community, want to offer that kind of kinship and love to people outside of our community as well, and gather them in. So this is the name that we have settled on, and armed with our new name, we moved into January implementing these plans that we had come up with. And so over the last several weeks, we have started 2 new weekly in-home small groups. So these are groups that are coming together for Bible study and prayer, for shared meals, support, group reflection. These are going on every week. We had our first mission project back in January on Martin Luther King Day. We went out to Central Park in Durham and worked with an organization called Book Harvest. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Book Harvest. If you're not, I encourage you to look it up. Pretty awesome organization. We actually had a used book drive leading up to that event, and then we brought all these gently used books, mostly children's books that we had collected, and we joined with a lot of other volunteers, and we sorted them for distribution. Book Harvest distributes these gently used books to help increase literacy among underprivileged kids in order to help them. And so that was our first mission project. We had our first big party. We had a Super Bowl potluck at the beginning of this month. It was a lot of fun, and got some new faces and gathered some new folks through that, and had fun building our community. And so that's kind of what's been going on. We have been able to reach out and grow this new community. And I'm sure some of you have questions about, well, who are these people that are joining this new thing called Kindred? And I think we have a slide for this later on. Creighton will get to it in a minute, but I'll go ahead and tell you. So currently we have roughly 25 total participants, give or take, that are connected to our new small group ministry. And the interesting thing to me is that only about 6 of those are actually members of this church. And what that means is about 3/4 of our current participants didn't have a church home before Kindred existed. So, that tells me we're doing what we set out to do, gathering folks into a church community that didn't have one before. Some of y'all will be curious about their ages. Right now, we're currently all millennials. We don't intend to be an only millennial church. That may not be sustainable forever, but that is one of our target demographics, and we've been very effective so far in attracting millennials into our community. So that's who's participating to this point. Wanted to say a quick word about our finances. I know I get questions a good bit about, well, how are we going to pay for this, right? Where's the money coming from? Well, Kindred is funded through a variety of sources. At the moment, University pays 25% of my compensation, and the conference pays the rest of my compensation. A lot of people don't know that. And the Kindred lead team members have all pledged for this bridge period. So we have people within our community that have pledged and are actively giving now. I've fundraised a good bit outside of University here, and I've raised just about $20,000 for Kindred separately. And then I've been working closely with Jan and will continue to be in close consultation with our finance committee to make sure that Kindred doesn't bite off more than we can chew. So that's something that we're being very attentive to. Well, I want to start wrapping up here, but I hope you can see, as I do, that Kindred is showing some signs of life and some signs of fruitfulness. And I'm very excited about that. And we actually have here a team of our leaders. Our leader team, not everybody could be here. Some of them have kids napping at home, and if some of you are young parents, you've been young parents before, you don't mess with nap time. So not everybody could be here, but I want to invite the leaders that we do have. If y'all could just come stand up front here so that folks can see you, and I know some folks are watching on YouTube as well, and we'll get you on camera better if you come stand up here. Yeah, not everybody at once. No, actually, everybody at once. Come stand up here. They're not each going to give a personal testimonial. We don't have time for that. But I did ask Emily Turner, who is one of our leaders, to share a few words with you about what Kindred has meant to her so far. So,
hello, my name's Emily Turner. I'm a member of the lead team here, and I'm one of these millennials that didn't have a church home after I graduated from college. I'm from Charlotte. I grew up going to church there, and then I came here, went to school at UNC. Now I'm a nurse at the hospital, graduated about 2 years ago. So I didn't really have a church home here, and when Daniel came to me with this opportunity, I didn't really have to think about it. I knew I wanted to be a part of it because I realized what I was really looking for was meaningful Christian relationships rather than just coming to a congregation and going and getting my sermons and going to church and going home. So it has been a really great experience. I have, after you go away from having that community for so long, you kind of don't really, reading the Bible isn't very fun, and it's kind of hard to pray sometimes. So being around people, these people here, has been really helpful to get back into that and have encouragement and talk about going through the same things. Going forward, I'm super excited about these small groups that we are doing because a couple months ago when we were talking about it, we wanted to start inviting some people to see who would come, and I started to invite a lot of people, figuring that all my millennial friends, maybe half of them would want to actually say yes, and maybe half of them would actually show up. But almost everyone has said yes, almost everyone has come, and the people that have come have already invited new people. We've only been going for about a month. So that just speaks to the environment and the atmosphere that we've been creating at this small group. That's a thing that people want and people need, and they also think that other people they know want and need. And this has been really exciting to do just for a couple of weeks. So I want to thank you all personally. I think I speak for everyone here, that we really thank you all for the opportunity to try this and to do this in the future. And we look forward to sharing the gospel with our communities through Kindred.
awesome. Thanks, Emily. So these are, yes. I was going to call for that because these folks have already invested hours and hours and hours of time in prayer. They've sacrificed time with their family. These folks, more than you probably can imagine, sacrificed financially for the sake of Kindred. And so I'm super proud of them. So thank you all for all that you've done so far for Kindred. Yeah. All right. Y'all may sit down now. I just really quickly want to invite Adam Broom, our current chair of church council, to talk about, from a church council perspective, how we're going to wrap up our discernment process around church planting. So,
Thank you, Daniel. As Daniel said, my name's Adam Broom, and I'm chair of church council this year. Clearly, Daniel has accomplished a great deal in just a little over 7 months since he's been here, and we're grateful for that. It shows, I think, that the Spirit is moving within our community and is uncovering a great unmet need for spiritual kinship that we can have a potential to serve. So a year ago, last spring, the church council voted, after listening to congregational input, to take on this year's commitment of discernment. And the time is nearing where we'll have to make a decision about whether to continue. That decision is coming up at our church council meeting that is scheduled for March 11th. I just want to invite you, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you'd like to share your thoughts about this process and where we should go, to please contact me or any of the members of church council. I know there are a few here. If I could just have a show of hands for those who are here. We have Ann and Jan Sassaman, who are here. Other members of church council include Jim Buterbaugh, Kathleen Templeton, Carl Knapp, Kate Pendergrass, Kelly Batten, Vaughn Cole, Meredith Dangle, Mary O'Lilla, and Jenny McGlone, and Justin, of course, is also on the church council. So feel free to reach out to any of the members of the church council and share questions, comments, or thoughts about this process. We'll be considering this more, and I hope you'll come to the information session that Daniel will mention. I expect in a moment that's coming up at the beginning of March as well, before the church council meets.
all right, thanks, Adam. Yeah, as Adam referenced, I wanted to try to speed things along as much as we could for this update in the town hall today, but we're going to have a slightly fuller church planting information session on Sunday, March the 3rd. Yeah, not the 4th. That's not a Sunday. don't come on Monday. It's going to be March the 3rd, right after 11 o'clock worship. That'll be over in the chapel, and then we'll have time for a little bit of Q&A that we don't have time for today, unfortunately. But go ahead and write down questions that you have about our church planting ministry, and we'll go ahead and try to be prepared to give you better answers for those questions at the info session here in a couple weeks. And then, as Adam said, the church council is going to be voting about all of this on Monday, March 11th. So please be in prayer. We want to make sure that we make a decision about this that's following the Holy Spirit's lead. So yeah, keep us in your prayers. Thank you.
Well, really excited to hear about everything that's going on with Kindred over the centuries of the church's life. It's been this activity that has continued to grow the life of the church, continue to give us life, continue to give us hope. And so it's wonderful to see Kindred here in the incarnational flesh offering us that life and hope as well. That is fundamentally what church is about, is this kind of activity. John Wesley said that if you weren't about, he said, the central task, as he looked at the Christians as ministers, your central task is to make disciples. Central task is to grow disciples and grow churches in that way. And so if you're not doing that, what are you doing, Wesley? Encouraged us. So it's good to see that happening in the life of Kindred. All right, friends, we have had a fun afternoon and day. Thank you for being here. This was not streaming. Something happened with the stream, but it is saved, so it's going to be uploaded into the system. So if you see anybody who says, I couldn't see it, tell them we'll be uploading it into the system so they'll be able to see it in an archived way. All right, go in peace. Blessings.